everybody, welcome back to Darvanalee Designs Studio. For those that don't know, my name's Nicole and today we are here for a beginner-friendly project. We're going to be making a computer mat, and this way we don't have to have a separate mouse or anything. You've seen them on Amazon. They're quite boring and plain, so I thought that we'd make some pretty ones today. So let's get started. Well, good morning, good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for joining me. As I said, we're going to be making this desktop mat that you can use your mouse on. And of course, I've got a little bit of a clip that you can see it all in action. But this is a really great gift to give to someone. We've all seen those mats on Amazon or AliExpress or, you know, wherever you shop, eBay, all those sort of places. And yeah, you can get some pretty ones, but in the scheme of things, they're quite plain. And I wanted some that were a little bit themed. So I thought that this would be perfect for my desk here in the sewing room where I do my designing and drawing and everything like that. And I'm actually going to use it as a mat for when I'm doing any sort of writing or anything like that. I like the feel of it, but it also will be able to use when I do bring my computer out to do designing on the computer. I can have my external keyboard and my mouse on here and it'll work perfectly. I also made another one for the library and you'll see that in just a moment. But without further ado, let's get into the tutorial. As I said in the intro, we're going to make a desktop mat. Now you're going to measure this as wide as you want and as long as you want. So I have made this one prior to being here today, and this one is for underneath my computer. I've got a nice little table in my library where I sit my computer and do my streaming, and I didn't want the top of it to get scratched, and I don't have a mouse pad either. So this one is actually 12 inches wide, and that seems to be the best size for fitting a keyboard on or for writing on or whatever the case may be. The one I'm making today is for my top table that I use as a desk out here, where you've seen me doing my journaling and all that sort of stuff. And I found that the tabletop on it that I have to give me a bit wider range has a little bit of staining on it, and I don't want that to come off. So I thought I'd make one for the tabletop. So this one is for underneath my computer, and you'll be able to see that in just a second, what it looks like underneath it. So this one ended up being, I cut the fabric at 32 inches in length and 12 inches in width. Of course, that's come down because I used a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance with this one, and that's brought it down to fit my tabletop, which was just under 12 inches. I think it was like 11 3/4, and of course it is as long as it needs to be, which after all the measurements and all that sort of stuff, it came down to the sewing and everything came down to 31 inches. So that's how long my tabletop is, and it's cute, it's witchy, and it vibes really well with my library. As I said, we're going to cut to that video and you can see how it looks. As you can see, we have made our computer mat and it sits everything on. Nothing is going to scratch the laminate wood that we've got on here. This was only a cheap table, but it's quite flexible, and I was really concerned because I was using the mouse on it and I didn't have a mouse pad, and I was going to end up scratching the top of it. So this has come in handy, and as you can see, my computer, it covers the whole bit and the whole top of the table, and my computer sits on it nicely. I've got room for my microphone. I've got room for a cuppa if I want to have a cuppa or a drink there. I tend not to drink around my computer because, you know, Murphy's Law and all. So yeah, I've got my little remote that's sitting there, and of course the mouse, as you can see, moves around quite freely on it, and so I don't need a mouse pad, and it looks so pretty. Okay, so that is what it looks like. It works perfectly. I'm loving it. It's going to protect my tabletop now, and I'm really happy with that. So that got me thinking, I need another one for out here for when I'm journaling. I don't like the feel of leaning on raw wood when I'm doing journaling, so I thought that this would be perfect. All right, so this one is a little bit of a different size. So remember I said that this can be any size that you want it. So if you want it a little bit wider, say 15 inches wide, then that's going to work really well for you. I've made this at 12 inches wide because I will eventually have my computer out here at some stage and working, and so then that way way this will be there, and I can put my mouse and I can put my keyboard on there because I have an external keyboard for it that I use when I am working out here on it. And I like that because I've got the design when I'm doing designing and stuff like that. So I thought, well, I would make it sewing theme for out here. So you're going to need two pieces of fabric. I'm just using homespun for the backing, and then this is my fancy one that everybody will see. And this one is coming in at 12 inches in width because I don't need it any wider than that, by 28 inches in length. I didn't want it really long. I didn't want it going from edge to edge. I just want it to where I'm working. You're also going to need to cut 2 pieces of interfacing. I've used Shapeflex 101, and that is for both the top fabric and also the backing fabric. And you're also going to cut some fusible fleece, or you can use thermoland, fusible fleece. You can use batting if you want to, but if you use batting, then you will have to do some quilting on it. Look to the manufacturer's instructions to let you know how far you have to quilt apart. You can just do some straight line quilting. That will work as well. But I don't need to do that because I'm using the fusible fleece. Anything that is just going to be laying flat, I never really quilt it. I've never had any issue when I've washed it. It's never come separated or anything like that. So for my recommendation, which I'm using Matilda's Own, and that's the brand I always use. I'll leave a link up down below if I can find it, because it's not easy to find. I'll leave a link up down below where you can get some of that. Alternatively, if you can't find Matilda's Own, Legacy brand is a good brand as well. And as I said, you can also use Thermoland, which I think is by Vilene. And you can also use Vilene for your woven interfacing. Now, that's going to give it a little bit of padding. It's not overly thick. It'll go through your normal sewing machine without a problem, and yeah, you'll be able to just stitch that just by lengthening your stitch length a little bit. You're also going to need a few things. Okay, you're going to need some pins. Maybe if that's all you've got, you can use pins, but I prefer to use Wonder Clips. I use the pins for when I'm rounding the corners. You're going to need something to round your corners. I'm using a 6-inch embroidery hoop, the inside of it. That gives me a nice rounded corner. That's what I used on these, and you can see it's a nice rounding, because if you've got a corner, it can curl up, and the rounding of the corners, just get it to sit a little bit flatter. You're going to need a rotary cutter. You're going to need something to poke out your seams and round your corners. You're going to need some thread snips. You're also going to need you can use your rotary cutter to cut the corners. Some people prefer to use scissors, so you'll need your dressmaking scissors, and of course you're going to need your pinking shears. Everybody knows I love my pinking shears for after we've finished sewing. All right, and you're going to need a marker as well. And one of the optional extras, which I'll leave a link up down below for you, is a clapper. I like these to set the where you've left your opening. I like to set that in, and it just gets it to sit properly. Now, with your fusible fleece, sometimes you can get a little bit of crinkling because your iron's a little bit too hot. If you run the clapper over it, it actually gets rid of a lot of those creases. All right, now you're also going to need an iron, a working sewing machine, and matching thread. So basically what we're going to do first off is around our corners. We're going to add all of our interfacing on, and you can see that I have added this on, okay, to the exterior fabric, the top fabric, and then also to the backing fabric. Now with this one, I actually put the fusible fleece down first, okay, and then I put and I just left that, I'm going to iron that down, I just left it to show you. I've put the fusible fleece down, and you can see that adheres really well, and then on top of that I have put the woven interfacing, and that is on the backing. All right, so once that is done, we are going to pin these together. And we're just lining our fabrics up. And don't worry too much if you get a little bit of movement or anything like that, because you're going to smooth it out, and then we're going to pin it, and we can move it as we go to get it to sit right. Now, I like to pin up in my corners where I'm going to do the rounding, and I just put 4 pins in. Move that out of the way. This is a really lovely gift that you can make for someone. You can make this a little bit wider and have it sitting under your sewing machine as well. Would make a perfect gift for someone as well, especially with Mother's Day coming up. Okay, so now we've put those pins in there. That means that these aren't going to move. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the inside of my embroidery hoop. Now remember, I'm using a 6-inch one. You can use a bigger one if you want a bigger curve. That is fine, but I find the 6-inch is probably the best. Okay, and then I'm just going to get my marking tool. Now, hopefully this will mark up on there and I can see it. If not, I'll get some chalk. Yep, I can see that. And I'm going to do that in all 4 corners. And you're just lining the edge of the embroidery hoop up with the edge of the fabric, and we're just going to be taking that little corner off. You just draw a line so we know that's where it's going to go. And then you'll do that down the other end as well. And then on the last corner, making sure everything is laying flat. And make sure that you actually mark too. That would also help. All right, so at this point you can just put that aside because you won't need that anymore and you don't need your marker, but you're going to want to cut this off. So a lot of people like to use their rotary cutter. I have no problem with that, and I just start up and I go around following that line until I come back, until I have come back to the flat edge. Okay. And you can see there that it gives us a nice curve. Alternatively, you can use your scissors, and again, you just start on that flat edge, holding it all together, and you cut on the line. And I cut on the line, not beside it. Okay, and then you've got a nice rounded corner. All right, and we'll do the same down the other end. As I said, I prefer to use my rotary cutter. I just find it quicker. A little bit wobbly with scissors. I've probably got to go back to kindergarten. And there we go. All right, so once you've got that done, you can sit your rotary cutter aside. We can take those pins out, because the next thing that we're going to do is we're just going to flip our top piece over onto our backing, and we're going to line our corners up. As I said, don't stress too much if it doesn't line up perfectly, because we are going to be using our pinking shears, and that way we will be able to trim all those sections off. So making it nice and smooth, I grab a couple of pins and pop them into the center. And another reason that I put the fleece down first is because this is like cotton. This is a woven cotton interfacing, and it makes it a lot easier to go through your sewing machine, whereas sometimes the fusible fleece can grab and it makes it a little bit difficult. This just makes it feel like you're actually stitching through several layers of cotton. All right, so we're putting, as I said, we're putting a couple of pins in, and that's just going to hold everything into place and make it a little bit easier at the sewing machine. Okay, and then we'll grab our wonder clips. We're also going to leave a gap, so just so you can see where I'm leaving the gap, I am just going to do that, and that is about 3 inches. If you've got bigger hands, like if you've got larger hands, just go an extra inch on that, 4 inches, but between 3 and 4 is pretty good. You can get everything out that way. A little bit cumbersome at times, but it can be done. And then all we're going to do, once we've made that mark, we're going to start stitching here, and we're going to stitch all the way around, back stitching at both of those marks and leaving that gap. But before we do that, let's put our wonder clips on, making sure that everything is lining up. Our raw edges are matching as best as they can. Okay, so now that we've got that all done, we're going to start at our starting point over here where we've got a blue mark. We're going to do a back stitch here. We're going to go all the way around until we come back to the next one and do a back stitch there, and then when we come back we'll turn it in the right way. Okay, so we're now at the sewing machine. We want to set our seam allowance to 3/8 of an inch, and you can see I'm using a magnetic seam guide there, and I'm just butting that fabric up against it. And as I go around the corners, I just slow down a little bit, and then that way I can easily guide my fabric through the corners. And yeah, I just do a couple of stitches and then relax a little bit as I'm going around, and then move the fabric and just keep it the edge of the fabric, or even on the curves, butting up against that seam guide there, and it just makes it super easy. So you can see here I'm just coming around and I'm just taking it easy, making sure that I straighten everything out as I go. And then once we come back around to where our opening is, we'll do a back stitch there, and then it'll be ready to turn around. So you can see I'm coming up to it now, and yeah, that is it. It's all done. Okay, so once you have sewn that all together, you can see there that we've gone around. We're going to get rid of all of our long threads, and then we're going to take our pinking shears and starting wherever you want to start and just go around, and this is going to help our corners sit really nicely. Now you're going to just trim this off and without going into your stitching, okay, because we don't want to have to re-sew it again. And you do that all the way around except for the opening. We leave that as it is. Okay, so once we've done that, we're just going to take our pins out and make sure that we've got rid of all of our long threads, because these will all be a pain if we're sewing. Okay, get rid of any last little straggly bits that may not be needed on there. And as you can see, we've still got that bit that hasn't been touched by the pinking shears, because that means that we will be able to fold this in and close up our little mat here. All right, so now what we're going to do is just pop our hand in. As I said, if you need to make it bigger, you can. We're just going to separate the two back and the lining, and the top part, and we're just going to push that out. And it's really important that you back stitch at that opening, because otherwise the seam will pop and we don't want that. All right, so give it a bit of a shake out. Put our hands in there, and we're just going to run around. So I like to use a this is a creaser from scrapbooking. It's just got a nice dull edge, but it's quite strong, and it just gets into these corners and just rounds them out really nicely. So I tend to use that when I'm doing any sort of turning out, especially with curves. And as you can see, I can just run it along that seam, and it just gets it to roll really well. And you can see it's sitting nice and flush, and then I'll do that all the way along the top here as well, and it just gets that seam, once we go over to the ironing board, to sit a lot nicer. You might have to roll it a little bit, but for the most part this creaser will just work really well. Alternatively, you can use a purple thing as well. I use them for more for points and stuff, rather than rolling out seams or anything like that. So yeah, all right, now let me get my hand back out. Dropped my little creaser in there. All right, so you can see that we've pushed that out. You might have to roll it a little bit more and just get your seams to sit a little bit better. And we just do that by using our index finger and our thumb to roll that seam. And when I say roll, it's just you rolling it in your fingers. And then that way we can go to the ironing board and press it all down and get it to sit nice and flat before we head back over to the sewing machine to top stitch. All right, let me grab the iron. And you want to have it on a medium heat, because you've still got that fusible fleece in there and you don't want it to crease up, although it is on the backing fabric, and that's a reason why I do put it on the backing fabric, just in case my iron is just a little bit hot. You're not going to see it on the back. But if you've got it on a medium heat, you should be fine, and you can just roll those seams and get them to sit nice and flat. So what you're going for is you don't want your seam to roll over so you see fabric on the back, and you don't want same for the front. Okay, so you want it to be sitting nice and even. And as I said, you just roll it between your index finger and your thumb and then press it. And also what I like to do is use my clapper, and that will help set the rest of the seam. Okay. Now, unfortunately, I know that some people are going to ask for this fabric. Unfortunately, I do not have any of this fabric left for sale or anything like that. This is fabric that I had in my stash. Sorry, cannot even remember the name of it or where I got it from, because I've had it for quite some time. So I do apologize for that. It is beautiful fabric, but I'm sure somewhere it might turn up somewhere. But not being able to tell you the name of the fabric or anything makes it very hard. All right, so now as you can see, I'm going to keep pressing, and I'm just sort of rolling here because I want these to sit really nicely too, because it's going to make it easier for this section to go in, and we won't have to use any glue or anything like that. We can just use our pins. I do like to use the glue if I'm doing a lot of closings. I'll just use the glue, and then I don't have to worry about the pins. Or the wonder clips, but today we're not going to worry about that. And the glue that I'm talking about that I use is just a basic glue, and it just holds it closed. It makes it easier. It is by Roxanne, and I use this stuff, like I've got tons of it around because I use it all the time for closing up stuff prior to stitching it, especially when I've got to make a lot of the same thing for my store. I'll leave links for anything I've talked about today. I will leave down below, and you can go and check them out. But most of these items, most seasoned sewers have them in there. It'll be just beginners that may not have heard of them before, and seeing this is a beginner project, I thought it'd be best to talk about them a little bit. All right, so as you can see, we're coming around and we're just rolling that and getting it all done, and it's looking absolutely fabulous. It's going to look beautiful in the sewing room. And yeah, all right, so we've gone all the way around, and as you can see, this is still poking out. So let me just turn this around, and what we're going to do is we're just going to fold our bits in, okay, and we're going to line them up. And the easiest way to do that is put your fingers where the seam is, and it'll just automatically fold in, and then you can just pinch it, and that's going to give you a nice straight line. You might have to fluff around with it a little bit, but then we're going to bring our iron up, and you can see that just popped out a little bit, but that's okay. We'll just fold that back in, but our top fabric is setting where our seam's going to go, so you can see there that that's got a nice straight line. So we've folded that in, and if your back one just pops out a little bit, that is fine, because we can just line our front fabric up. And this is where I like to use the basic glue, or in this case we're just going to use pins today. And we're just going to line those up, and you can see that that is looking very similar to what the seam looks like, and that's what we're going for. Okay, hopefully you can see that okay, because these are dark fabrics up against each other, but I'll get it all done, and then I'll just bring it up a little bit closer for you to see. Okay, so I want to put, and when it comes to the openings, because I want them to sit nicely, I do get a little bit excited with the needles, with the pins rather, and putting more, probably more than I actually need, but it gives me a nice finish, and I can look at that and say, right, that is looking good. I can see that those fabrics are matching up quite nicely. It's going to continue on. All right, so once I've done that, I'll just give it another quick press, the center of it, and make sure that everything is looking good. Use the clapper if I need to, just to get a nice finish on those seams. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to head over to the sewing machine. We're going to lengthen our stitch. We're going to get our matching threads, and I'm going to use a purple on this today because it'll match it nicely. And basically what you're going to do is you're actually going to do a 1/4 inch, okay, all the way around, and that's just going to give us a nice, that's just going to encase that seam that you can feel in there, and it's not going to make it sit like really bulky or anything like that. I prefer it that way because then it just sits nicer. Alternatively, you can do an 1/8 of an inch, but it's a little bit difficult on this sort of one when you've got curves and everything. So I always stick to a 1/4 inch top stitch, and it hasn't failed me yet on something like this. I do that on my table runners as well. All right, let's head over to the sewing machine and do that. We're going to start just before our closing, and we're not going to reverse here. We're just going to start with the needle in the down position. And then we're going to, as I said, lengthen our stitch length probably to about a 3.5, not too much more than that. It gives you a nice finish. And we're just going to stitch all the way along, all the way around till we get back to this point. And then what we will do is we will reverse then. So we'll come over, we'll go over 2 stitches on the stitching that we already done, and then go back 2 stitches and call it done. We don't come forward again, okay? That stops the bird nest effect that you get on the back. All right, let's head over to the sewing machine and get that stitched down. Okay, so we have now stitched that all down. Now all we need to do is just get rid of any long threads, so you can see that's a bit easier to see on the back there. We've gone all the way around. It's quite a lengthy stitch, but it lends itself to being a nice flat stitch. Take off any of your long threads. Okay, and also on the back as well. You can see there's no bird's nest there, and get rid of any fluff or anything. And now what we're going to do is give it a really good press, and then it's ready to use. Let's grab our iron, and we just want to go on a medium heat still, okay, because remember we still have that fusible fleece in there, and we don't want it to bunch up because it is a polyester blend, the one that I'm using. So just check your manufacturer instructions. It will give you all the information that you need. And there we go. This is perfect for my sewing room. Okay, you can see it's sitting nice and flat. Flip it over, give it a good press. And there we go. It is ready to use. So let me get rid of the iron. And there we go. That is our little pad done there. We've got 2 gorgeous ones, one for each room. One's a little bit bigger than the other, but that is because this is going to be perfect enough for me to, you know, have my mouse on here on my desk and also have my keyboard without it sliding all over the place and not having, you know, a separate mouse pad and all the rest of it. All right, let's go and set it down on the table and check out what it looks like. And there you go. That is what it's going to look like on my table. So as I said, I will, you know, I do have my computer come out here from time to time, but for the most part, this is where I do a lot of my drawing and designing and all that sort of stuff. And it's just going to be a lot nicer to be on that pad rather than leaning on this board, which I find that I get a little bit of staining from it. So this is going to save me from doing that. And if I do bring out my computer, I still can use it for my mouse and also for my keyboard, because I have an external keyboard. But that is the end of the tutorial today. I hope that you enjoyed making this. I would love to see them. I've got a Facebook group where you can share your progress. And of course, don't forget, if you like this video today, to give it a thumbs up and also share it with some of your friends, because, you know, hey, we always need to make up our pretty mats and everything for our sewing room. And as always, don't forget, if you have not yet subscribed, please subscribe to the channel, and then that way you're not going to miss out on any future uploads and tutorials. But that is it from me today. Have a wonderful day, everybody, and as always, I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.